Remember back in the day when you had to wear like face masks everywhere and you were sniffing your own disgusting oniony breath and you would occasionally like burp and you were essentially smelling your own burp. Okay, that's what it was. 2020 was an absolutely crazy year, but we survived. We're here. But anyways, all that nonsense aside, in today's video, we're actually going to get pretty serious. It's going to be pretty heavy, and I guess as serious as action figures can get, because let's be brutally honest, we're just talking about action figures. That's all we're doing. It's not really like groundbreaking, and I guess it can't really be that serious because there are things way more serious happening outside in the real world. But in today's video, I wanted to talk about something that I think I've already mentioned maybe like 3 to 4 different times on this particular channel. And if you guys are interested in seeing like a full-on recap of what's going on with NECA, I do have a number of other videos where I go into more detail in regards to how they treated their customers and how they were essentially like threatening their own consumer base, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. So you guys can check that out, because it would be ridiculous for me to try to recap everything for like the 5th time. Essentially, I wanted to pick it up right after. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fallout that we're starting to see from NECA as a whole. And you know, this has been ongoing now for like, I think for like a couple of years, but it has really started to ramp up over the past few months. So essentially, after this whole debacle with their consumer base, a lot of their customers just started turning against them. They started to really essentially start a campaign against them because they felt that they were wronged by one of the bigger action figure manufacturers out there. And I think that they have some very valid reasons. And so, as I said, in today's video, I wanted to kind of pick up on the ramifications or the consequences for some of the actions that NECA took. Now, the first, kind of like warning signs that we started to see had a lot to do with their blind boxes. They started releasing these blind boxes where they would essentially offer you a bunch of collectibles for about $130. I think with taxes and everything, it was about like closer to $140, and you would get a ton of really cool NECA 7-inch scale action figures. Okay, these were themed. It could either be horror, sci-fi, pop culture, so on and so forth. You would get like really high class, or I should say high quality collectibles. And I've already said this before, but I'll reiterate it. I felt like these particular blind boxes were meant more for new collectors or people that wanted to try their hand at NECA collectibles that probably did not collect them before. I don't think that a lot of like hardened NECA collectors really needed any of these collectibles because they seem to be pretty consistent throughout. You were essentially getting very similar figures even if you bought multiple blind boxes. But as I said, this to me was kind of a really big warning sign that there was something wrong. There were even some unconfirmed rumors, or at least I think they're still unconfirmed, that potentially some of the retailers were actually sending stuff back to NECA. I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate, but there have been multiple people reporting this, where essentially, you had big retailers, and we don't know exactly who they are, but you had, like Walmart or Target or Best Buy just coming out and saying, you know what, we can't handle your product. We're not even going to try to send it out on sale or on clearance. We're just going to send it back to you. You can figure out exactly what it is that you're going to do with these collectibles. That's definitely, again, a big warning sign from one of the biggest manufacturers out there. Why would they decide to handle business this way unless NECA came out directly and said, hey, send us our product back? If it's been sitting on store shelves for maybe like a year or two, we'll try to figure things out. Maybe they did it that way, or maybe they handled the situation in a very peculiar way, but I just don't see it. I think most likely the retailers just did not want to deal with all of this overstocked inventory, and they decided to send it back. And granted, look, a lot of people out there, and I remember in my previous videos, there have been a lot of different individuals that said that this was pretty normal. This was the norm. They were just trying to get rid of overstocked inventory. They probably had warehouses full of a bunch of merchandise. But I think there's something deeper that's lying underneath this, because even though, yes, that's probably what's happening, I think that the fact that some of these retailers were actually sending their product back to them, I think that speaks volume. Not only that, let's keep in mind, NECA is really not an OM to do this very often. Like, I've been collecting action figures now for quite a while. I mean, a few years, and I don't think I've ever seen NECA go through this type of transition. Granted, they've always had sales here and there. For the most part, they'll have some figures go on clearance, but that's very scarce. That's very rare. That's not something that you consistently see for them. I mean, I could probably see like 100 Marvel Legends action figures go on sale or on clearance before we actually see one NECA action figure. So for me to start seeing a lot of these on sale, that raises some concerns. And honestly, I wouldn't have made this video if I hadn't had my own experience. Like, I actually went down to my local Walmart. I was buying, normie stuff, whatever reptilian humanoids buy, like diapers and all that stuff, milk, just boring nonsense. I happened to run into the electronics section where the NECA stuff and all the Funko Pop stuff is at, and I happened to find one of the unarmored Lash Ronin NECA action figures. Again, this is a TMNT figure, and I was able to purchase it for $20. It was on sale, it was on clearance. I don't know what the original price point for this particular figure is. It's either the new $37.99 price point or the $34.99 price point. Regardless, I'm saving about $15 to $18 on this particular figure. Now, you may think, well, that's a pretty good deal. That's pretty sweet. But we just didn't see this as often back in the day. They actually had another one of those like monsters, Universal Monsters and TMNT mashups, or the crossovers. They had a couple of those figures as well for $25, and then the other one, I believe they had it for like $18. It's absolutely insane that we're starting to see NECA on sale or on clearance way more consistently. It's just not something that we used to see. Sometimes we would see some of the C-list characters or some of those deep cuts from the TMNT universe, or maybe we would see like some offbeat, maybe like a horror character go on sale here and there. Maybe some of the Toon Terrors, things of that nature. Some of those sublines maybe would go on sale, but never core TMNT characters. Like, we would rarely see something like that, even if it is like the Universal Monsters crossovers, or even if it is the Lash Ronin line. That was pretty consistently like a big heavy hitter. Those would usually sell out for long stretches or long periods of time. And it's crazy now that we're starting to see so many sales and so many clearance regarding NECA, and then they're doing their blind boxes. I believe after it really started to slow down, if I'm not mistaken, they actually released a second wave of blind boxes that were actually now going for about like $90. Again, they probably couldn't move the $129.99 price point fast enough, so they decided to drop it a little bit. Yeah, maybe they're taking a few figures out of your blind box, but still, for them to make a move like that and still try to consistently move blind boxes, there's something definitely desperately wrong here. And this, to me, could be just the fallout of how they've been handling some of the situations with their consumer base. Some of these issues that they had where they were, essentially threatening their own consumer base. I think we're starting to potentially see a domino effect where their consumer base is really turning on them. And honestly, look, I don't think this is necessarily like a good thing per se, but I actually like the fact that that the community is actually using their voice, they're using their wallets, and they're kind of letting NECA know that they're not happy with the current situation. They're not happy with how they're being treated and how they're being threatened and how they're being attacked. And that's the best thing that you can do. Sometimes you don't just vote with your wallet, but you can voice your opinion as well. You can criticize an OM. A lot of people like to say, well, if you don't like the figure, if you don't like the OM, just don't support them, just don't buy them. But just as they have the ability to manufacture whatever figure that they want, they can treat their consumers however they want, you have the voice to be able to criticize them just as much. Just because they're a big giant manufacturer doesn't mean that your voice won't count against them. And I think what's happening right now, it's a good thing. I think sometimes when a consumer is able to stand up to a big OM like that, it really could send a message to them. Maybe in the foreseeable future, they handle things differently, or maybe it's time for NECA to just move on from having these licenses. Maybe they just don't deserve them. I've owned a few figures here and there. I'm not like the biggest NECA fan ever. I prefer articulation over sculpt, and NECA has really never been very good in terms of articulation. They have a lot of limitations. They tend to kind of prioritize like accessories and sculpt and things of that nature. But I definitely don't want them to lose the license. But if this is what it's going to come down to, I would like to see it. I mean, I would love to see the TMNT license potentially move on to like Mattel. I know Mattel has done some stuff here and there. Maybe even the DC Multiverse can pick up some of the TMNT stuff, or, Jada Toys or so on and so forth. I mean, it's really fun to speculate about what some of these lines could do. They do have a lot of horror stuff as well. Maybe some of those horror figures could be manufactured by other OMs. We just don't know. As I said, if the manufacturer is just not valuing its consumer base, if it's not valuing the license, I think it's time for them to start losing it. And honestly, it won't even be up to us. Like whoever owns the TMNT license or the franchise or the property, they could potentially see what's going on with NECA and its community, and they could potentially step in and take the license away or have it move on to somebody else. Look, essentially the main point that I'm trying to get across is that I feel like this is a domino effect. I think these are the consequences for how NECA has been treating its consumer base, and now they're starting to kind of fight back by not buying their products. And I definitely feel like they're in a little bit of a hole because they still have to replace some of those diorama sets, or they're having to refund a lot of those customers, and that's a lot of money that they're going to lose out on. Only time will tell. But as I said, we're starting to see a lot of that fallout. We're starting to see them really panic and have to, clearance out a lot of their collectibles to try to recoup a little bit of that. As I said, for people that are huge NECA fans, this is really bad news. You still want them to be successful. Obviously, I mean, you want to get deals here and there for the most part, but you also don't want to just be giving these figures away because that could potentially mean that NECA is, essentially circling the drain at this point. But again, this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. I may be making too much out of this entire situation, but I feel like at a certain point, NECA is going to start to get really desperate here. They lost quite a bit of money with that whole debacle. And as I said, we're starting to see a lot of desperation from them. We're starting to see the consumer base turn on NECA. And as I said, I like it. I like the fact that people are voicing their opinion, they're voting with their wallets, and that's really the best thing that you can do as a consumer. So as always, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy this type of action figure rambling, make sure to stay tuned. We're uploading about 4 to 5 times on a weekly basis. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there. And as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. I know it's kind of hard to enjoy the hobby sometimes with all this nonsense going on, but we still have to make time to just enjoy our figures, pose them, photograph them, just have fun with them. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.